Speaker. Just a short call to say that I stand to support this bill, the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill. And it is about making the student loan scheme sustainable into the future, sir. And it reduces the need for government to borrow against the scheme whilst still allowing students to prepare for their future. Sir, it is a bill that builds on a statute we've already passed this year, which allowed for defaulters of loans to be recalled in full. And essentially what we're doing here is cleaning up an area of defaulting of student loans and addressing the overall size of student loan debt, which, as we know, grows year on year. So our government, sir, have maintained interest-free student loans, and we're really about getting value for money from the scheme as it goes into the future. So we've introduced performance criteria. We're focused lending on those that really need the money and prepared to pay it back and are succeeding in their studies. So, sir, I support this bill.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the member on a very profound contribution to this particular debate? I want to respond briefly to one of the comments that Gareth Hughes made, or some of the comments that Gareth Hughes made from the Green Party in his speech. Quite a good speech from Gareth Hughes, in which he pointed out some of the inconsistencies in the position of the Minister, Peter Dunn, and quoted back to him comments that he had made during the term of a previous Parliament. And I'd simply note that, in fact, Mr. Dunn is very consistent when it comes to all matters that he supports the government. And I think he's been relatively consistent over quite a long period of time in that. We probably don't need to say any more about that. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party is very proud of our track record when it comes to student loans. We introduced interest-free student loans, and we stand by that policy. We're very proud of the policy of interest-free student loans. It has made it a lot easier for hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders to repay their student loans. All of the doomsday predictions made by the National Party when that policy was introduced, when John Key stood up and said that what did he call it, the biggest bribe in New Zealand's electoral history, and that he was going to fight it with every bone in his body. Well, that's kind of interesting. Obviously not many bones there, but it's pretty spineless. But in fact, the doomsday predictions that John Key and his colleagues made haven't come true. That didn't result in a massive increase in borrowing. It didn't result in a massive increase in the amount of time that students take to pay back their loans. In fact, the average repayment time for student loans since interest-free loans came in has halved. Students are paying back their loans a heck of a lot quicker than they were when they were being charged interest. It's actually done the opposite of what the National Party said. Now, I note that John Key said before the last election National would not reintroduce interest on student loans in their first term. I noticed that they have made no such unequivocal commitment for their second term or their third term should they get them. And in fact, Stephen Joyce, I understand, is very keen to introduce interest back onto student loans if the National Party are re-elected. And we know who that will hurt. That will hurt the people who are already struggling with the rising cost of living, who this government aren't interested in hearing about. They want to reintroduce interest on student loans. If they're going to do that, they should come clean with the people of New Zealand, front up and say that that's what they're going to do, because we know that in their heart of hearts, that's what the National Party actually believe in. Mr. Speaker, most of the provisions in this bill are provisions the Labour Party will support, because we believe that students should repay back their student loans. They shouldn't take off overseas and not meet their repayment obligations, because ultimately that penalises the people who do pay their loans back, and we don't think that's fair. However, we do have some concerns about this bill. In particular, I'm concerned about the shortening of the repayment holiday that someone can apply for, shortening that down from 3 years to 1 year. The Treasury says it's not going to work. The Ministry of Education says it's not going to work. For once, they agree with each other, and for once I agree with both of them. The government have been told that shortening this won't have the effect that they want it to have. In fact, it's likely to have the opposite. It's likely to lead to more people defaulting and creating more problems. I agree with the Treasury and the Ministry of Education on that, and I think that this is a very short-sighted move. The government should actually listen to the advice of their officials in this particular instance and not do it. We also have some concerns around some of the technical details of the bill that will be canvassed during the Select Committee process on this. But overall, I think it seems to be a reasonably good bill. It builds on some of the positive changes that have been made earlier on and some of the changes that we opposed earlier on. But the overall intent of the bill is a good one, which is to make repayment of student loans quicker and easier and more efficient, and I think that's something we should support.
Michael.